not
Horror convention?
We'll put it online.
some people that go from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I will be there Sunday. So I was kind of, it's gonna be Eugene. I think that's the three. So, I don't know, if you still were in on it, you're still in on it. We'll talk about it. That's it. Very good. He's done one for it. Infamous is not
Savannah?
He's heard one before.
You probably have.
You ever seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Years ago.
Remember the guy that carried like a coat hanger around and scratched his head and he got a metal plate in his head?
I don't know. I have to, no, not, I don't know.
That's who she dressed up as.
Y'all got any extra color pencils?
You'd have to get crazy
How are you doing?
I don't know.
I'm good. I left all my color pencils somewhere.
You can borrow some there. They're all around. Here's some pencils. Nobody sits at this table. Although if they're, I don't know if they're the same as yours. Okay. They're kind of a step down from your fancy $9 ones or something. Those are just the $7.
Places have me busy.
I don't know if the colors are as vibrant.
I did have to expect color
I've been on TV before.
Hey, look at these over here. These over here.
She has some too.
Watch yourself.
It's got a.
I've been hanging out with mother always.
My great
I'm not
grandma.
just using it. Anyway.
Keeps them out.
Look, we got this page covered. We're going first. Lisa McCarley. I'm so glad Lisa
Did you go to it?
I got one joke for
You went to the
you.
concert?
For a while.
Later on,
I'll get this.
It come on at like
it's a long one. But it's a good one. Yeah.
Last night?
it was
Friday
Friday
night.
night. They come on about 9:20 and play till about.
One of my favorite.
Oh, we played a while.
Sometimes there's a little bit.
They had a different people that played when they did
One of my favorite jokes on Lisa.
Yeah.
First off, there's a little bit of truth in every joke. You know? There's a little bit of truth in every joke. She constantly jokes. She's always plotting and finding ways to kill Scott McCarley, whether it's through poison or whatever. A little bit of truth to that joke, I think. Just a little bit. It's like, I wonder if I could get away with it if I did it like this.
Yeah.
You got that K in the back. I don't know what you're waiting on. You know. That is funny. I'm sure you've already used that joke, but that's pretty funny. That's good. Poor guy. And a couple other stragglers will wait. We got a couple quick announcements as we wait for other folks. Next week is Scott McCarley, the meaning of Pentecost. On Pentecost, you can't get any more event packed in than that. Very good.
All about time.
Yeah, it's all about time. Oh yeah, sit with your wife there. She was just talking about murdering you. Anyway.
Hey, where's t-shirt money?
T-shirt money.
Oh, there you go.
If you have some T-shirt money, Tracy will take it. There you go.
Yes.
You have a more fancy announcement, Tracy? Go ahead. We did place an order for 19 shirts on Wednesday, so that's pretty good. That's good. I don't know exactly how long it takes, but it's not like so just don't be patient.
So we don't already have them, is that what you're saying?
We don't already have them, and they're probably not even being used yet. I mean, started yet. So we will get them.
Where did you go?
I went to High Tech Science, but it's like they have two parts. It's like High Tech Science, High Tech Specialties, or something like that. So it's cool.
I'll call them.
Yeah, you call them. They're very nice. They're just a little slow. Just a little slow. That's okay. One other of the main things to keep in mind is if you haven't signed yourself up in some type of a way to volunteer for VBS, you can find your spot now. spots are being filled. Also, there's efforts online and hopefully in your own lives to register. Go ahead and get everybody registered and stuff. Quit whisper talking. I know you just said something dumb. Anyway.
Wow.
Anyway.
Class can I go to? What job would change you?
Moving on. So VBS, we got that the last week in June. We're gonna go ahead and go through this. Tara's in here now, so previously in Judges, we've walked all the way through the first page in Judges, and we made it through the introduction. We made it into the cycles of the judges and their own stories. We've continued emphasizing the cycles that's not working.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just asking. I'm getting on to you.
I was caught up in listening.
I was caught up in listening. Anyway, we continue to emphasize the cycles of apostasy and of deliverance, and this whole cycle of this way. It keeps working its way into the same cycle over and over and over. We'll see that throughout. It just got a lot hotter in here. I don't know if you guys know. Got a corduroy shirt on. I think that's what it is.
That's when another teacher coming in your class and you're
The
Yeah, it's like it's the principal. It is. Moving on.
observing.
But
Always got nerves and trust to come in and play.
that was every day for you, though. You know. Anyway, but these cycles of apostasy and deliverance that we see in each of the judges. We started off with Othniel. We talked about how he's this great warrior. He's brave. He is our hero, and he's the last in the book to some degree. And we talked about how Yahweh he raises up a shofet, a rescuer. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. There's peace in the land for a generation. Then Othniel dies. And here we are, right back in the same state again. Then we had Ehud, and we talked about how he was the left-handed shofet. His story is told with literary satire and comedy, and it is just it is a ridiculous scene to some degree. It is. He's like, hey, I've got a message for you. Hey, I've got a message for you from God. He lures him in, setting the trap. Last week we focused on the differences between Ehud and Eglon. How he's clever and he's sharp and he's fast, and Eglon is this dumb, dull, and slow character. And there are contrasts between the two. We also talked about Yitkeh, which we're going to use again today. Is the Hebrew word. It means to thrust. It means, so Ehud does it. He blasts the ram's horn. He Yitkehs the ram's horn. And then he Yitkehs the dagger into the king. And so he plunged it into the king's belly. And we'll use that word again today in a very important way. But they strategically use the topography of the land that they're around to their advantage. They take control of those shallow crossings in the Jordan River, not allowing any retreat, no regrouping, and that wipes them out. We talked about Shamgar, and we talked about what his story is, how he becomes Israel's judge. He's only left with the one verse there at the end of chapter 3. And then we discussed how coming into chapter 4 and 5, we've got the prose and the poetry. We have the narrative line, and then we have this elaborate song, a victorious song in chapter 5. We introduced King Jabin, who ruthlessly, cruelly ruled over them for 20 years. Then his general, Sisera, has these 900 iron-rimmed chariots, or iron decorated chariots. And the Israelites cry out to Yahweh, and then we have the call narrative of Deborah. And we kind of we talked about what that meant a little bit. How the author tells us that she's a prophetess. She was serving Israel by allowing the Israelites as a group to come to her to have their disputes settled. And we talked about how important she was. She wouldn't have been the low settler of disputes. She would have been for the nation. She would have been assuming the role of Moses. She holds court under the palm of Deborah, and and it's between Ramah and Bethel, and it's this easily accessed place for them to come to her. And at the same time, she holds court underneath the palm. Sisera holds court in his headquarters, ruthless. And that's where we're going to start today. So we'll open in prayer, and then we'll get right into it. Dear Lord, we just thank you so much for bringing us here this morning. We ask that you open our minds as we study your word and allow the Holy Spirit to guide us into all truth. Challenge and change us this morning. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to be in Judges 4, verse 6. If you follow along, that's on page 2. Anyway, but no, it's Deborah's commissioning of Barak. And we've walked right into where we're at right here in verse 6, and we'll pick up there. One day, she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. She said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." And so there's an important thing that we have to understand in verse 7, I think, first, which really it may change the way you read this whole section. In verse 7, we have a lot of eyes. When Deborah speaks, she's speaking on behalf of God. She is a prophetess. And we also talked about in ancient texts, you've got the subordinate. When they speak on behalf of someone as a messenger or as an envoy, their own speech is their master's speech. So Deborah, being a prophetess, she's the mouthpiece of God. And like Jeremiah, Daniel, Isaiah, all of the ones we're far more familiar with, she is the same role. She holds the same authority. Here's an excellent line that I stole from somebody else. But God's authorized agents speak for him, and the Bible uses first person to do so. And many times I think we can be a little confused by that, you know. And in some of the back and forth, especially with her and Barak today, it is a little confusing. But we'll walk through it. But in verse 7,
Can I ask one question now? Or no, I can wait.
what's your question?
Right after it, Karen.
Does it have something to do with what we're talking about?
Well, yesterday, no. No, I was about being the mouthpiece of God, but yet, like, and women can't preach, but you can be the mouthpiece of God. Like, I was
Today?
in the car.
Yes. Today's Mother's Day, so
Say no.
we'll get to that. No, that's a great
We
question.
should save it till the end. I just
Yes.
didn't want to kind of.
It's in my closing a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so very good. Keep that in mind. Hold on to that. Where did we come up with that? What's the difference here? It's good. It's good. She's so controversial, you know.
No.
I'm proud of her. Anyway. Verse 7, and I will call out to Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors, to the Kishon Valley. There I will give you victory over him. There I will give you, their Yahweh, their God will give you victory over him. In Deborah's speech, she gives Barak commands. She sent and summoned him. Then she says, go and gather. I really like the ESV, where it's got more of the commands to him, rather than our NLT, a little softer in some of that. And you do this, you do that, and I will give him into your hand. All these commands that are much more forceful, I feel like, coming from as she's lining him out to some degree. But Barak, you know, his name means lightning, and you know, each week we've been giving a face to each one of our characters. You know, it's for us to maybe make it a little more easily identifiable. And this week, for the face of Barak, I chose Sandy Koufax. Anybody know Sandy Koufax? Yeah,
Baseball player.
He's a baseball player, one of the most famous. Sandy Koufax. The only one old enough to remember him was Scott. But anyway, he is a Jewish hero. You know, we don't realize the impact that he had on, you know, the Jewish community in America, not being part of it. But he's the greatest professional Jewish actor. And he played for the Los Angeles Dodgers for 12 years. In his second year, he goes and joins the Army. He comes back. He's even better than he was before. It's crazy. He has what ESPN would tell you. He has the greatest. His peak is the greatest peak. You know, Greg Maddux would be a contemporary to some degree, or not a contemporary, but a more modern Sandy Koufax. You know, Sandy Koufax was he was tough. One of my favorite things about him, his nickname is the left hand of God. That's pretty good. Just throwing that one out there. But he is left-handed.
Okay, you should have picked him to be the.
Well, here's the reason I picked him today. He's very quiet, and he's shy, you know, and like he doesn't like the spotlight. But how can you not be in the spotlight when you're playing for a professional baseball team and you're in Los Angeles, you know? And so he was super popular when he retired. They try to make him this announcer. It does not work. He bombs at it. He just sits there. You know, it's like it's kind of like a thing for him. He signs this 10-year contract and he ends up breaking it and he loses all this money and stuff. But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. He's very shy. He's a man of few words, but he is a man of action. You know, so. I really like him. I had another story about him.
I interrupted. He's left-handed.
He is left-handed.
Is that what your
yes.
story was about?
But anyway, he's very. I think he's got a good face. I think I got another picture of him here. It's a very small picture here. Get out your magnifying glass. Anyway, so keep his. Yeah, I like the next. I think he's looking up. It's only bigger. Anyway. But anyway, if you got a visual, he's got a good face for him. So, but if I can draw your attention to your map, here's a good. Let's go ahead and we're going to get into our map just for a minute. We've got Deborah. She's got her own marker on our maps. She's right there towards the center of everything, as we talked about her position in between Ramah and Bethel, so everybody can come to her. She's shown slightly south of Bethel on our maps. Her little tick marker. She's just south of Bethel. But she and her husband are in the land of Ephraim, right above Benjamin, in the hills, the hill country. And next we have Hazor, which is way up to the north. It's just right under the little lake up there. Hula Lake is the way it's labeled on our map, so it's very hard to read. But it's a very small lake way up above the Sea of Galilee. And that's where King Jacob is. He's up in Hazor. In the land of Naphtali, if you put your finger there, on Hazor, we'll come back to it in just a second. You got Sisera. Sisera's over to the left, or to the west of where Deborah is. He's in Harosheth Hagoyim, that's where he's at. His 900 chariots. He's in this fortress. We'll go with fortress. That's pretty good. But he's in like this barracks over there. He's got all of this stuff. He's halfway to the sea. Let's just call it. And in verse 6, it says, she sent for Barak, who lived in Kadesh, in the land of Naphtali. And Kadesh, if you still have your finger on it, is right underneath your finger, pretty much. Kadesh is right there, right beside Hazor. So he's just right there beside it, where King Jabin is. And I find that pretty interesting. Yahweh wants Barak to go to Mount Tabor, which there's this little triangle. You can see Mount Tabor. It's this isolated mountain, which is in Issachar. And it's just south of Naphtali, but it looks like a cliff. If you were to see it, and you were to drive up on it, it's huge. But it's not very large in comparison to other mountains. It's just the only mountain right there. So when you have only this one mountain to look at, it looks tremendous, you know. But like it's I think it's 1,843 feet tall, where some of the western mountains are 5,000, 6,000 feet tall. But it's over there all by itself. So it's an important place in the region there. From top, you can see all of the Jezreel Valley. You can see everything from up on top of there. And that's where she wants Barak to go to collect his 10,000 warriors. So, from the top, you can see all over the place. It's mentioned 11 times in the Old Testament. The New Testament is never mentioned, but it is believed. Scholars would tell you that this is where the Mount of Transfiguration is. This is where Jesus goes up and the whole scene of the Transfiguration happens. It's not labeled in the New Testament, but that's where it's at. So at Mount Tabor, General Sisera, Barak summons the 10,000 Naphtali and Zebulun warriors with him, and that's where they are. It's right there at the table. Last setup on the map is West Manasseh. It's a tribe of Joseph, and it's shown in yellow. It's a pretty large section right there on the left of the Jordan River, and it touches 3 of the tribes to the north. And there's a line that goes across there, the little dash line. That is the river itself. That's the Kishon River that we end our story on today. It connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. And strangely enough, it actually flows from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which is, you wouldn't think that, but it does. But it's that's the river in which, as the battle goes on, and they push them up against the river, that's where they are. So, giving you an idea of we're all over the map today. So we got Barak, and he's summoning the 10,000 warriors at Mount Tabor, and God calls out to Sisera, to the Kishon River, or he calls out Sisera to the Kishon River, and that's where you're going to beat him. So, God, Yahweh, calls the general. He's also the commander-in-chief here, where he determines the strategy. He lays out the battlefield. He sets up this entire thing. I mean, if you want to go even further, he's the one who put them there in the first place, So he determines the outcome. There, I will give you victory over him. I will bring Sisera out. I will call out Sisera. Now, this is Deborah speaking, but it's on behalf of God. I think that's very, very good. And then we've got a couple verses there where Barak has this hesitation. And in verse 8, Barak told her, I will go, but only if you go with me. Very well, she replied. I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture. For the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. And at Kadesh, Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 warriors went up with him. Deborah also went up with him. And I feel like this section is so strange for me. He hesitates in this super strange way, like it doesn't have to go like this. It should read, for me, we read 6, we read 7. Hey, I'll call out Sisera, commander of his army, along with his chariots, and then you should go straight into 10 with Kadesh, at Kadesh. He calls them out, and Deborah went up with him. And there's this, they stick these two verses in there in particular to not only fill in the end of the story, but to tell you some about Barak himself. Barak's hesitation is placed there, and for me, I think the first thing that I naturally do is is he scared? Is this like a level of him being a coward? There's a lot of different ways to look at it. Does Barak identify that the Spirit of God is with Deborah? And when he sees her, he's like, hey, I'll go as long as you go with me, I don't know if anybody had the chance, I'm off subject here for a second, but if anybody had the chance to watch the trailer that we watched last week, Hold the Pass, there's a very interesting thing that happens in that movie. Shamgar, the angel of the Lord comes to Shamgar, and of course this is all extra biblical, but he, as the Spirit of the Lord comes into him, his eyes are blue from that point on. And you better be on his team to some degree. Because Shamgar, he's just a man of action. But is there something that he can sense about Deborah, and that's why he wants her to go with him? Or is it because he's afraid? Is it because he's fearful? I don't know. There's a couple different ways to look at that. But the spirit comes upon. He's scared.
What's the name of that movie again?
Hold the Pass. You have to watch
Hold
it.
the Pass.
Hold the Pass. Write that down. Spell it for him. But the Spirit comes over the rescuer, the Shofet. The author doesn't mention the Spirit here. As we talked about, as we continue through Judges, we start getting less details and less details, and we focus on all these other things. But God is represented by his prophetess Deborah. And in a way, isn't he saying, well, I'll go as long as you, God, comes with me? That's the smartest way. I'll go in as long as you come with me. From our man's point of view, I think we look at it like, okay, so we got 900 chariots, and I'm sure he's got more guys than that, but I do have 10,000 warriors here. I'm doing pretty good, just in our own eyes. So I don't know, but you can
I like
think
the
about
God theory that he sees God.
he sees God in her. He knows when you hear someone speak on behalf of God, and it probably rings a different bell in your head than just a normal person talking. Just a lady who hangs out underneath a palm tree in her yard. But typically, the call narrative here, once this person hesitates, what typically happens, and we'll get to it with Gideon, is God says, "Fear not, I will go with you." But here Deborah says, "I will go with you."
She's just right in there with him. As soon as he asks, she's right there. It's the next line, which I think is pretty good. But she is functioning as God's alter ego to some degree. You know, she is there speaking on behalf of him. Where the prophetess is, there God is. Then the answer of the call of the men. As Barak decides to answer the call of Deborah and God, the 10,000 warriors answer Barak's call as they go with Barak and Deborah to Kadesh. And so here's the climax. We're going to jump right into this. Verse 11, I'll read all the way through the end just because, man, there's just so much stuff. If I stop it, I won't ever be able to get to it. But Barak's victory is a funny name for this part. Now Heber, the Kenite, was a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law, Hobab, had moved away from the other members of his tribe and pitched his tent near the oak of Zainanim near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, he called for all 900 of his chariots and all of his warriors, and they marched from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you." So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all the chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leapt down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim, killing all of Sisera's warriors. Not a single one was left alive. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, the son of the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir. Come in. Don't be afraid." So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. If anyone comes and asks you if there is anyone here, say no." But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and a tent peg in her hand.
Oh.
Yeah, here we go.
She drilled it, buddy.
Oh, you nailed it with that one, Leanne. Anyway, I had that stored up. You know what I'm saying? Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground, and so he died. When Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him. She said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead, with a tent peg through his temple. So on that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king. And from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him. So here we have God giving deliverance to the Israelites under the leadership of Barak. And there's a lot of layers here, but there's two main phases to this passage, to this narrative. You start off with God defeats Sisera and the army, and then you have Jael's killing of Sisera. And those two are very. There's so many things going on there. But before we go any deeper into it, I do feel like when you go through that part and you see the way the plot lays out, it's very similar to Ehud. You know, it's very similar. You've got Ehud and Eglon. We talked about them last week or the week before last. But in both stories, God's working with this individual. And then there's this overall picture, the expanded narrative of what how that individual is involved. But then we have this account of the troops and how they actually win the war. And we go in and we see that individual and what his storyline and how it plays out. In Ehud and Eglon, you start with this one private individual effort, and it ends with the story or the defeat of the other army. And in this story, it starts off with the defeat of the army, and then it goes to the individual, Sisera, who's fleeing on foot. And I love the what you have going on here, where you have this huge story, and then you have this smaller story inside of it. there's an excellent movie if you have enough time to watch it. It's called Hidden Fortress. It's a 1958 Akira Kurosawa. It's Japanese, but you can put the words on the screen in case you don't know Japanese. But it is the story of these two peasants. They're farmers, and here they are out in the middle of this gigantic battle. You know, it's this feudal war between these raiders, these rebels against the emperor of Japan and this huge empire that is unbeatable. And you kind of follow along with them as this big, huge thing's going on. So you have this big story, and then you have their smaller story on a smaller level the whole time. Years later, 1978, George Lucas, who's a fan of that movie, takes that same idea, and he takes C-3PO and R2-D2, and he puts them in this story where you have these rebels in this huge fight against this evil empire. He steals the whole story, but he's in outer space, so it doesn't count. It's a completely different thing. But it's very similar, though, how you have this very small narrative inside of this huge story, you know? And that's kind of where we are here. So we'll back up. We'll break down the details of the climax. We start off with Heber. He's this Kenite. We've talked quite a bit about Kenites. He's a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law Hobab, and he's moved away from the other members of his tribe. And here he has pitched his tent by the oak of Zenenim near Kadesh. And then you're just like, well, this guy's got this whole. Here we are, right in the middle of all this action, and here's this guy, and he's just like this lone verse, you know. What's this insignificant character? He's identified as a Kenite. He is, we know, and it says his brother-in-law is Hobab, which is a descendant, but Jethro is Moses' father-in-law, who we've talked about many times. He was, you know, in Exodus, we walked through his whole story. But we know from our study of Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, who the Kenites are. They live down south. But here, he's this fish out of water. And I think that's the way to see him. He separated himself from everybody else he was with. And he lives near Kadesh, up there at the top where all the action is. He's pitched his tent by the oak. So from out of nowhere, here's this surprising note and character that we don't know anything about. And he's found himself right in the middle of the battle. And of course, this is not an accident. His name means an ally, or united is another good one. But we find out that he's actually united with, he's actually the ally of Jabin, the king. So he's a Kenite. He's not an Israelite. He's from this very dry region down in the south. Here he is up in the Jezreel Valley, which is a very fertile area. And this is where he's pitched his tent. It doesn't say this is where he built his house. He hasn't laid down, his foundation here. He's just pitched his tent here, you know, which is pretty good. Of course, that plays out also. But I do feel like there should be like this temporary nomad kind of feel to him, where he hasn't completely committed to this whole living here type of a thing. I do like the idea that he is this guy who's looking for greener grass, and he's there to some degree. But he's pitched his tent by the oak of Zenenim. I can't say that, but anyway, the word itself means to pack up. I like it. Many people I read kind of use it as like a trader's post kind of a thing. So there may be a lot of merchants, type of people in this area. We'll get back to that though. But in verses 12 through 16, the author describes the defeat of the army. This is the large scale. This is the bigger picture. Sisera heard that Barak had summoned his troops. He calls his 900 chariots, and they march or ride towards them. Speaking for God, Deborah tells Barak, it's time for you to attack, and she promises victory, as God promises victory. And the key verse there is verse 15. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all of his chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leapt down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Barak chases the army all the way back to the stronghold. Not a single one's left alive. And so we see this as a group. You know, like this whole time here we're talking about whole. You know, the whole army, this whole army. And then 17 through 22, here we go to this individual. And then like the narrative slows down. And the details become more, impactful. And it's a good part here as Sisera's running off to hide to save his own skin. So Deborah and God are not a part of this smaller story, which is very unique. They leave the narrative, much like Ehud when he's over here and he enters the area there of Eglon. We no longer see the hand of God in action. So much like the other one though, like the assassination over here and then this scene over here, in both sections, you don't have the divine hand. The focus of the individual actions is the focus. The use of speech to get the victim into this vulnerable position. You've got treachery, you've got deception. There's murder and discovery. The use of Yitkay, which is such a good one. Here, she Yitkays the tent peg through his temple. Yeah. Chrissy responds every time to that. It's funny. Again with the tent peg and the temple thing, But there's this sequence of entry and discovery. There's so many parallels in the two stories. In the assassination of Sisera, we see Sisera's intent is to run away for himself. He's running away from Barak and his army, and he's seeking refuge in the tent of Jael, who happens to be Heber's wife. And so now we obviously know why we had the verse up front there explaining who Heber is. A little bit out of order, but it's okay. But it sets up him, and it sets up the whole scene there. We know that Heber himself is an ally of the king. So you'd obviously assume that she would be as well. He's living in Judah, but he's not in with the Israelites. So Sisera believes that he can find refuge in her tent. I don't know if there's some type of banner. Maybe they fly the flag of Jabin. However you want to say that. Maybe the totem out front. Maybe whatever you want to set up the scene with. In some way, he felt this is my ally. It says right there that Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. There was a peace between, is another translation. But in verse 15, the importance there is Sisera's on foot. Here's this man with 900 chariots, and here he is. He's on foot. He's trying to save his own skin. And then Jael comes out with this southern hospitality. She comes out to greet him, and she comes up out of her tent to greet him. And she's just like setting a trap, honestly. Like she's very deceptive in her actions. But it would have been a common ancient Near Eastern greeting to go out and meet the person. We'll see that in different passages. She welcomes him, she takes him in, and even like assures him, hey, don't be afraid. You're all good here, buddy. Nothing but me in this blanket. So then she covers him in this blanket, which is translated rug in another translation. What? You had a joke. Just go ahead and throw it
That
out.
was a little picture of Scott and Lisa.
Oh, we got to that. Yeah,
I got ahead.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
But she covers him with this blanket, and another translation says rug, which I like that. It's goat skin, it's sheep skin. Man, we should have went over that first. My bad. That's my bad. But it is this man-made covering used to go over things as furniture to some degree. The point is she's hiding him. Anyone who looks into the tent wouldn't see him. I like the idea of it's like curtains. My favorite way to look at it is like she puts him behind the curtains and his feet are sticking out. That's my favorite way to look at the scene. But another funny one is like, if you want to say it's like a rug, that it's like a bearskin rug, and he's laying there and his head's in the bearskin. Anyway, it's kind of funny. But anyway, that's just making it a little sillier. But he's lying in the middle of the living room. He's on this bearskin rug. His face is sticking out. Anyway, she appears to be helpful. She greets him. Come in. She hides him or disguises him. Sisera makes a request. Please give me some water, he said. I'm thirsty. So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. Just like you'd expect out of this lady, she has her own plan going, and like this is her plan. This is a premeditated plan. I think that's a good way of looking at it. I already heard Jeff whisper to Christy the point of the milk, which is good. She is somewhat dosing him up there, like it's hot, he's exhausted. The milk, he's out, and so it obviously didn't have the same effect as water would have, and so for me, as I see this premeditation in place, if I were to give a face to JL and Haber,
So was the placement of the tent on purpose? Did they know this was gonna happen?
Oh no, I don't think so. No, I think
It was
if
only
he would've went to-
premeditated
if he would've went
from
to,
the moment he showed up.
Haber's tent, he would have been saved. That's what I think.
So they
But
didn't have
God's
the
hand
same
is on
tent.
this. Now do what?
It wasn't the same tent.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Also, it is looked at. This is a very famous scene, but it is looked at like her handmaids would have been there as well. So it wouldn't have been a one-on-one scene, which would have been very scandalous. Her handmaids would have also been there. So they're probably helping hide him, you know? Oh, here's another rug. Anyway, he asks for water. She gives him milk. Sisera tells her, stand at the door, deflect any suspicious people, you know? Just go ahead and let him know I'm not here. He falls asleep, and she nails him to the floor. And she is an assassin. Let me just read this one verse. But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and a tent peg in her hand. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple into the ground, and so he died. I would think so. Artists have always painted pictures of this, and one of my favorite ones is this is 1620. But and you can tell by the clothes they 1620 it, because I mean, how else would anybody dress except the way we dress, you know? But is she a villain? Is she a hero? She's a very controversial character. You know, what does the author think about her? Is a good way to look at it. Her name means mountain goat, which I really like. There's this book, and it's called.
All I know is that woman's probably got some beast arms, buddy. That slam that thing.
The
through his-
linebacker.
Yes.
I'm like,
But there's this book.
because you know she only got one shot at it. I mean, like literally, she had
One
to
hit.
like slam
Oh,
him.
goodness, that's a good point.
I was thinking, why did
If
she
he
use
didn't
the
get all
pen?
the way in, he would come
Yeah,
up
yeah.
and.
That milk's not gonna.
Why not just use the hammer? It's like you trying to be specific with that tent peg. Just bust them with a hammer, you know?
He did that is their hand.
I think women were responsible for setting tents up anyway, so she'd been very proficient. at doing
Oh.
that. She'd
Like
been-
one hit and don't, it's in.
It's like a carpenter. It's like, you know, there was some. And there's a work day around.
That's what I'm
the
saying.
church,
Do you know how
like,
hard she had to hit that thing and
that's right,
drive it?
They'll hand you a nail, you know, and I'm opening it, I'm like, and then like Hunter comes up and he's like, boom, you know, and boom. So this is kind of like that one kid, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
That would have been a sharp
Um,
peg.
probably a sharp thing.
She probably had it all ready to go.
Yeah, so that's good. So closing up here, I do want to talk about her just a little bit as an assassin.
Well, and she had to be pretty smart. I mean, because it had to be she had to be really quick on her to think it through. Like, I know what I can do to get him. Like, you know, she didn't know he was going to show up.
Put Lisa's head face back up there. She has this social status that I think we kind of miss sometimes. She is this wife of Heber who is an ally of King David. And then here comes Sisera. He's trying to find refuge in the tents. And Jael, she's this take charge woman. Everything she does, it's all action. She goes out, she meets him, she confronts him, she hides him, she gives him the milk when he asks for water, she K's the peg into his head. She welcomes Barak, she displays her trophy. She has this initiative and she's feisty is the way that's the way I like to sum her up. But she is an assassin. And she's a traitor to her husband and to his allies. So from a social standpoint, she's very controversial. What do the Israelites think about her? It's a good question. What does the author think about her? Is another good question. She would be a heroine for the Israelites. She would be. She came to our rescue, although she's not one of us. She is the same as Ehud on some levels, though. You know, is she any better than him? Is she very comparable to him? Verse 22. You know, Barak came out looking for Sisera. Jael went out to meet him. She said, "Come, I will show you the man you were looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead with the tent peg through his temple. And then, yeah.
I'm just seeing this like he's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
do not mess with this woman.
And I'm like, there's this all of the suddenness to that verse, which we kind of lose in our NLT. The ESV says, "Behold." All the old ones say, "And behold, here's this guy. He's got this tent peg in his head." Couple things is what is Barak's motivation? Is a good talk. You know, is he seeking for his own glory? Is he trying to follow Yahweh? Is he, what is he trying to do in this whole thing here as he's chasing down Sisera? That's a pretty good. Is he trying to prove Deborah wrong? One of the things Deborah says is, you'll get no fame out of this. The Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. That was her prophecy. So Barak says, if you'll go with me, I'll go. She says, I will. But this road doesn't lead to glory for you. Is he trying to prove the prophecy wrong? Is he trying to fulfill that himself by chasing down Sisera? One thing about Jael's character, like I said, she's a traitor to the Canaanites. In killing Sisera, she guarantees the victory for the Israelites. But she violated these social customs, this wifely support, any type of ancient Near Eastern understanding of a wife, or even she breaks codes of hospitality. Even she's kind of scandalous. Don't keep that in mind as you see.
I mean, she could have been killed really for that, doing that, right? For going against
Oh,
her
absolutely,
husband.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
She puts
No,
her whole family.
no,
at
but
risk.
my thing is,
It's not controversial.
But I mean, like, later on, was she?
well, we don't know.
Why does she invite him into her tent instead of into Hebrews? She kind of has this plan right off the bat, in my opinion. She's already like, I'm going to take advantage of this. Here he is. Is he wounded? That's fine. It doesn't really say that. It just says he's exhausted. But she premeditates his murder. And the Israelites benefit from all this, making her a heroine. But for Barak, he's shamed. We don't really get that. We don't really get the Hebrew shame sometimes in things. But she fulfills his role in his eyes. She actually displays this deep contempt for Sisera and Jabin and Heber and Barak. She kind of disses on everybody involved. So from the author's perspective, she is the agent of deliverance. She fulfills the prophecy. God does give Sisera into the hands of a woman. This role should have been by one of the more predictable characters. We have this prophetess, we have Israelites, we have all these different things, and here she is. She's this Kenite, the wife of an ally to the enemy. When we get to chapter 5 in a couple weeks, Jael offers a different paradigm of motherhood than Deborah, who is labeled as the mother of Israel. Like Ehud's assassination scene, her antics and actions are that of a Canaanite and not an Israelite. The author doesn't give a hint to her religious beliefs, ties to God, or even that she cares about the Israelites at all. So many times when we read these narratives, we assume that we've got Deborah up here and she's with God. Here we are, but then we get down here to all these other characters, and really God's not really mentioned in that. Now, I'm not saying he's not involved in it. Obviously, he knew it was going to happen before it did. He got Deborah to say it, but it is very strange. She's not really acting on behalf of the Israelites at all. The author doesn't give a hint to her religious beliefs, ties to God, or even that she cares about the Israelites at all. She's acting all on her own, and her reasons are mysterious. Her role is socially a revolutionary. She's an assassin. She's kind of got her own thing. And then here in closing, I said that like 3 times, but the chapter ends with this summary statement, God's security statement, which we have at the end of each one of the cycles. The author's focus is shifted from Sisera to King Jabin. Yahweh gave victory over King Jabin. The story never was about Sisera or Barak or Jael. It's about Yahweh and King Jabin. And that's really it's the beginning, it's the end, it is the main thing. The beginning is actually reversed there on that last line. In the beginning, Jabin is he's pressuring the Israelites. And then at the end, the Israelites are pressuring Jabin. I really like that in verse 24 there. From that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him. So, all right, some comments, questions, angry outbursts. We had some mother words in there, but all right. So to discuss Deborah and her role as the mouthpiece of God, and now in a modern set, we look at women as that's not their role, or it would, or just the role of just preaching in general, or to speak about the text and to explain the text in front of a group is maybe a better All right, Jeff's here. Go ahead, Jeff. What do you got? Here we go.
Well, there's every believer, man or woman, is called to the priesthood of God. We are all called to speak for God. I mean, that's our role, witness for the Lord. However, the New Testament delineates vocational callings. And I think it goes back to basically creation, the way God created it. But men are ordained as vocational pastors to be able to exegete scripture in front of a mixed group of people. Women don't have that calling. It doesn't mean a woman doesn't understand it and can't explain it, but God basically had to stick to his original plan of creation. That'd be a hierarchy. But all people, women, even today, we all have the responsibility to speak for God. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to testify to his goodness, talk about what he's done for us, share the good news. I mean, that's our number one calling as a believer. But there's a difference between that and a vocational calling to actually exegete scripture from a group of people.
A glass of water for that.
You good on that? She's gonna let me have it later. Anyway. No, it's a good question. It is a good question.
Well, I was asking that in the car the other day. That's my-
Yeah, one thing about her for me, especially like in comparison to other prophets of the Old Testament or anybody who's of any importance in the Old Testament, she's right there with, she holds the same standard as, whoever you want to put in there, Ezekiel, Daniel, she's definitely on the same status level and same importance, when she speaks, it is God speaking, as we see in this one instance where she calls out a prophecy and then that prophecy is fulfilled.
And it's really easy to look at that too and let it confuse us, I think.
Well, and it could.
It's not really meant to do that, I don't think at all. And I think it is a beautiful picture in the New Testament of how God, from the beginning, like you said in creation, set up man and a wife, and then the bride of Christ, and then the way he loves us, and the way, I don't know, the way it's just all set up. I mean, if you look at it in the proper way, it's not meant to, belittle, or is to help each other. It's just about having each other's roles.
And there's a
But
big
it can
controversy
get
now
very
between.
confusing.
There's a big controversy between egalitarian and complementarian.
We don't know.
Where
We don't know what that is.
The egalitarians say women can preach. That's fine. Let them go.
Okay.
Turn them loose. Let them go. Because if you don't let them preach, you're belittling women. You're making them less than what they should be. But those of us on our side, we think by doing that, you're making a woman less than she was created to be. Because she was created with a role. And when you try to usurp God's hierarchy and role that he's created, that's when you make a mess of it, and that's when things get crazy.
All right.
Well, I also was going to say, maybe at this time, like with Deborah being the main prophetess, whatever you want to say, is because of the fact that Israelites were all doing evil, and she was the only one that actually has this strong relationship with God. And because, I mean, you're like, where the heck is her husband in all of this? It's like, but you, yeah, and my thing is it's like that God, like at this point, everybody's doing whatever they think is right in their own eyes, except for her, and he's like, well, then I'm going to use her to prove a point to them, because once again, they're all just, hey, whatever, and stuff like that. And so, I mean, sometimes God, he uses uses ordinary people But in some aspects, you kind of look at it and you think, well, that's kind of how it is in some aspects here today. I mean, like, we could take something from that. Like, the man is supposed to be doing what his role is, but he's not. So she's taking it, you know, and where we're not supposed to. I mean, maybe there's another lesson in there that, you know, hey, this wasn't supposed to be this way. So this is not how it's set up.
Well, and a lot of theologians believe that because of Deborah and Jael and all the ladies in the story, that this whole episode may have been the first gynocracy in history, you know, where
What does that mean?
female rule, where all the females are ruling. Because of the abdication of men and their responsibilities.
So because men are I mean, because God He has set it up a certain way, intentionally.
You need a dictionary.
I need one.
Very good. All right. So we'll close up. Hopefully, I do feel like the Ehud saga, today's, there's just, I mean, you can't get much better as far as like some crazy storylines, unpredictable things happening. Next week and the next, we're going to have a 2-part series on the meaning of Pentecost, and you know, to prepare for that, you can read Acts 1 and 2. That's a good one. And we'll meet next week. All right.
Can I say one more thing? There's one more thing about this story that interests me. I think it parallels the Exodus in a lot of ways, because the Kishon River flows down below Mount Carmel through the Valley of Megiddo, and because of the topography, when it overflows, it turns into just like a mushy marsh, mud pit kind of thing. And the way that text reads, that's what happened, and all those chariots just got stuck there. You know, that's what caused all the chaos and confusion and all that. Kind of to me like the Egyptians getting in the middle of the sea and then it, you know, collapsing kind of thing. I think there's an intentional parallel with the Exodus in there, with the deliverance kind of thing. But it's just something that always interests me about it.
That's very good. We're going to talk about that next week in the chapter 5 where they talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. No, just kidding. All right, so anybody have any prayer requests or anything you want to share before we dismiss?
Y'all continue to remember Heath, the little 9-year-old that has cancer. He's getting treatment. They did find out, like Lacey shared, that it's treatable, which was great, going from stage 4 to now it's Hodgkin's lymphoma, I believe, but still, it had already spread to so many different places. He's having to have very aggressive treatment. He's been in ICU some, but he's also been doing really well considering. So continue to remember that little family. He's his name.
How old is he?
9.
Pray for the Barak family. That's a little 16-year-old that got killed this past week. His brother was cutting a tree, a new tree surface, and the tree twisted, and he didn't even realize it even landed on him. Landed on him and killed him. He didn't know he was under the tree until after he started cutting the limbs off the tree. So.
He's not our student.
Yes. God's family.
Oh, notice that voice.
How does that sound?
Don't you make me come out there. Anyway.
She's got a hammer and a tent there.
Yeah, we got that tent there. Larry, you gonna pray for us?
Lord, just want to come for this time, just thanking you, Lord, for this day. Lord, just thanking you, Lord, for the privilege of getting to come back and worship you. Lord, I just thank you for all that you do in our Sunday school class. I thank you for this group. I pray that you just be with each family. Lord, I pray especially for each prayer request we've heard today, Lord. You know the needs, Lord, you know the situation, Lord, and we know that you're in control, Lord. Sometimes we don't understand why it happens, but Lord, we know that you understand. And Lord, we just need to trust you. Lord, just pray that you'd be with each family, Lord, be with each situation. Lord, and Baylor, most of all, Lord, that Lord, we can be a shining light in that bad situation if we get the opportunity. Lord, I just love you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.
You get any ideas?
last night? He did.
Huh?
He did. What was the best one?